Martial is isolated. Skirtle here. Oh, yes! Welcome to Manchester United, Anthony Martial!
What happened to Anthony Martial? The Frenchman will be leaving Manchester United this summer after 9 years at the club. He's experienced ups and downs during his Old Trafford career, but where did it ultimately go wrong for the once golden boy talent? This is the hidden truth. On the 2nd of September 2015, Manchester United bought a relatively unknown French forward from Monaco for a price beginning at around £38.5 million, but it could rise to over 50, with one of the clauses included being a Ballon d'Or nomination. His immediate impact versus Liverpool got fans very excited, and his first season overall under Louis van Gaal was a major success. 17 goals and 8 assists, including an FA Cup semi-final winner against Everton. In fact, his role in the FA Cup win is quite understated. He started all games and had 2 goals and 5 assists in those appearances, including, of course, the epic last-minute winner against the Toffees. Louis van Gaal, of course, worked brilliantly with youngsters across his career, and he loved working with Martial. Anthony is a naturally talented, young, multifunctional forward with great potential. I believe this is the club for him to continue his development. However, the Dutchman did not last much longer at Old Trafford, and he was sacked after the FA Cup final and after Martial's first season with the club. In comes Jose Mourinho, and immediately this is where things started to get shaky. Zlatan Ibrahimovic comes into the club, a big signing, a legendary player, and he immediately takes Martial's number 9 shirt from him. Now, some people may be saying this is irrelevant, it's a shirt number, but that's not how Martial or his team saw it. His advisor at the time told reporters that this hurt Martial and they thought it was disrespectful and misplaced. A couple years later, Martial actually spoke about it himself and explained that Mourinho didn't tell him that the change was going to happen. During the holidays, he sent me a message to ask if I wanted to change to the number 11, explaining to me that it's great because it was worn by Ryan Giggs, a club legend. I tell him that I have the greatest respect for Giggs, but I prefer to keep the number 9. When I return to the club, I see my name with the number 11. The story did not end well. He lacked direct respect for me. So immediately it seemed like Mourinho and Martial did not mix well, although he did play 42 games in Mourinho's first season, but started just 26 of those. He scored 8 goals and registered 8 assists in what was a respectable season while United won the EFL Cup and the Europa League. However, it was the following season in 17-18 where I think Martial's problems with Mourinho really came to the fore. In the opening half of the campaign, the French forward was in very impressive form. In the first 22 Premier League games, of which Martial only started 13, he had 13 goals and a number of assists, and in general was in really good form entering that second half of the season. However, the January transfer window comes around and Alexis Sanchez joins United from Arsenal, and he starts 12 of the remaining 14 Premier League games, 9 of them being at left wing, Martial's position at the time. That second half of the season, where Martial had more inconsistent game time, he didn't thrive as much as he did in the first half of the season, and he ultimately was left out of the France squad for the 2018 World Cup, which they of course went on to win. He wasn't a fan of that. It was the World Cup season as well, and it cost me a lot at the end, especially as the France team won. I should have been there. Of course, at this time there was rumours flying around that Martial was going to be sold. Mourinho was interested in bringing Ivan Perisic in, and ultimately it seemed like it was the ownership who stepped in because they wanted Martial to stay at the club. However, the following season was once again a mixed season for Martial. Jose Mourinho was sacked midway through the season, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer brought in, but Martial didn't immediately have an impact under the Norwegian. It was not until the next season where Martial had his greatest season in a United shirt. He bagged 23 goals and got 11 assists as he found a role that was working for him. The relationship which he had built with Marcus Rashford over the previous years really came together in this year, and Ole showed immediate trust to Martial, selling Lukaku in his first summer window. It seemed to all be going really well for the Frenchman. However, the following season was back to inconsistency for Martial, who scored 7 goals and 5 assists in all competitions, but was really heavily criticised for his work rate and overall form throughout the campaign. Edinson Cavani was also brought in, and while Ole had shown love and commitment to Martial previously, it always seemed clear that he really wanted a striker who would, quote unquote, break their nose to get a goal. The following year was once again inconsistent, injuries, and eventually loaned to Sevilla in January. After a brilliant 1920 season, the following 2 years completely broke down for Martial and was probably the beginning of the end for him. But he tells a different story. The last 2 seasons I have regularly played injured. People don't know that. I couldn't accelerate during the 4 months following COVID season. Solskjaer tells me that he needs me, so I play. Given my game, if I can't accelerate, it becomes very complicated, and I get criticised. The coach never bothered to tell the media. Obviously, I end up getting injured for good, and when I come back, finished. I don't play anymore. I took it very badly. I had a feeling of injustice. You are asked to sacrifice yourself for the team, and behind you are dismissed. For me, it is almost treachery. That's all I hate. I can be blamed, but not for being fake. Now this might be one of the biggest parts of Martial's downfall at United that hasn't been explored enough. When you speak about Marcus Rashford and the difficulties he's faced, it's almost always mentioned that he's played under injury, and that is completely fair. But this is a very good point made by the player himself. Martial lost what he was good at. The agility, the speed, the turns, it all seemed to go following these seasons. And if we are to believe him about the context behind these injuries, and I don't think he would lie, then you've got to ask serious questions about the management at this time, and perhaps the lack of depth which meant that he needed to be playing those games while injured. But ultimately, once again, it seemed that there was a complete disconnect between the player and manager. Following on from Solskjaer came Erik ten Hag, who clearly rated Martial very, very highly. You can look at almost any time the Dutchman was asked about Martial during his first year in charge, and he had a glowing reference. He was hoping that Martial would find fitness, but it was injuries, injuries, and more injuries. That has unfortunately been Martial under Ten Hag, and there's not much more to say. So we've gone through the timeline, we've looked at the issues, but what went wrong for Anthony Martial? I've got a few things. Ultimately, despite joining the club at 19, amazingly talented, he never developed enough from that time. Whether that's his fault, the club's fault, I think it is a mix of both. Then you look at the managerial problems. No player wants an unstable environment, which is exactly what United has been since Martial joined the club, but at the same time, the managerial issues just add on top of that. He had a great relationship with Louis van Gaal, who brought him to the club, but both managers who he played under following, Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he ended up having a tainted relationship with both of those. But on the flip side of things, people could argue that those managerial issues should not be the be-all and end-all of a player's career. You could argue there's a mentality issue there, but you do also think that a lot of top players over the years needed to be loved by their managers. Sir Alex Ferguson, the best at it, dealing with players in different ways, and it seemed like Martial's managers didn't always do that. As well, of course, the injury troubles have plagued Martial's career, but not in terms of the inconsistency. Maybe there's certain players like Luke Shaw who, when he's fit, he is still brilliant, but the injuries are more an inconsistent problem where he can't be trusted to play full seasons. Martial's a different problem. He's of course got that now where he can't play consistent games, but it's the fact that these previous injuries have affected what he was best at. But finally, the last thing that I want to mention is Martial's perception. The Frenchman disliked doing media. That immediately put him on the back foot with English outlets. He was not passionate enough. He has always had this cold demeanour about him where he doesn't look like he cares too much. Whether he scores, plays well, plays poorly, he always seemed to be at the same level. This made people build an image of a lazy footballer. Like Paul Pogba, he received the same treatment. I don't think either players were lazy. I don't think either players didn't care, but it's quite easy for the masses to build this kind of perception. And that's not to say that the Frenchman gave his all every single week and left everything out on the pitch, because I think that's also a disingenuous argument. But it's definitely not one or the other, in my opinion. Anthony Martial had the world at his feet when he scored on his debut against Liverpool, but it never worked out for the Frenchman. There's multiple reasons which I've went through in this video, but I think if you're going to take one thing from this video is that it was unfortunate. A player of that quality should have gone to the top. It's a shame, but unfortunately it's not the only player to be destined for the top and fell after joining Manchester United, and that's something that needs to change.